Hello, my name is Brian McKeown. I'm the author of Hannah's Left Hook, and I'm here in Southborough to give a presentation to these folks about the book and what it's about and where it's located, and I'm looking forward to that.
I'm Laurel King, and I'm the editor and publisher at Garland Press, a small independent press in Shrewsbury. And tonight it's my privilege to be here at the Southborough Library to introduce author Brian McKeown and Hannah's Left Hook. I've been working with Brian for a few years now, and he continues to impress me. Of course, the first thing that impressed me was his writing. And when I started Garland Press about a year and a half ago, Hannah's Left Hook was the first book that I thought of that I wanted to publish, and I was lucky enough to have Brian sign on. So recently, Brian's had some serious health problems, and he further impressed me with his determination to finish the editing and to promote the book. If I had been in his place, I know there are a lot of times where I would have said, sorry, I don't think I can do this, but not Brian. He's taught me a lot about dedication and true perseverance. Thank you, Brian. Now about the book. Hannah's Left Hook has something for everyone. There's a strong female character, and I mean really strong, with a fist that does serious damage throughout the book. There's not one, but two love stories. There are two naval battle scenes, one from World War I, one from World War II. I'm not a big fan of battle scenes, but these two kept me riveted. Somehow, Brian managed to get humor into both of those battle scenes. There's heroism on the part of many characters, not just Hannah. There's a murder mystery. There are agent provocateurs. There are riots and protests. There's lots of drinking. There's the forgiveness of sins and the punching of a priest, and there's history. Hannah's Left Hook is filled with the history of the first half of the 20th century, in particular the history of Birkenhead, England. And Brian's going to tell you all about that tonight. So without further ado, Brian McKeown, author of Hannah's Left Hook.
Well, thank you. That was great, thank you. I didn't know you felt that way. Yeah. Well, you told the whole story now, so we can all go. Great, thank you. Yeah, Hannah's Left Hook falls into the genre of what genre does it fall into? Historical fiction. Don't you love that word, genre? I mean, it's so French. And the story is about this this poor washerwoman who, at the age of 26, discovers that she's developed this devastating left hook by scrubbing the church floors many times. So then she uses this God-given weapon to protect herself from the bad guys and the bigots and the bureaucrats and the bullies, as well as her family. And basically that's part of it, but it's not the whole story. The story is more a story of survival in the first part of the last century. Because in that 50-year span, so many things happened that were ugly, that was terrible, and people had to survive through that. And here in the United States, they call that the Greatest Generation, and I think that also applies to Britain as well. So there's that part of it too. So the story starts in no, first of all, let me do this. I got a problem, okay, that I recently gotten worse, and that was the fact that there's little gremlins in my head, and they're eating away my brain cells, which is annoying because I didn't have too many brain cells to begin with, and they affect my memory. It's ABCD. It's dementia basically, and these things are breaking my what do they call them, canaps or something in your brain, okay. And what that does, it destroys my memory, and I can't control that. It just happens. So that's what's going to happen tonight. I'm going to be talking, and suddenly I'll stop. Okay, and the word doesn't come out. I want it to come out, but it doesn't. And sometimes I have to and ah, and I lose the where I am in the whole thing, and it's very embarrassing, particularly when you're giving a presentation, you know. So bear with me, okay? It's going to happen, and hopefully it's not going to be too bad. Happily, my wife here, Sue, okay, will help me. She's going to cue me. She's going to know what I'm going to say or can't say, either here or anywhere else. She knows the next thing I'm going to say. But also we have a slideshow, so that's going to help as well. Okay. So Hannah's left hook. They say that, well, before I get into that, let me just say that I wouldn't blame any of you for thinking to yourself, well, here we are, you know, it's 7:30, and this guy has come to talk to us about his book, yet he's going to be and ahhing, and he's going to, you know, lose the drift, and he's going to have to depend on his wife to help him, and on top of all of that, he's got an accent. I don't see how you folks are going to get through this. So we'll give it a shot anyway. The novel itself, it doesn't is not like a lot of novels where the end of one chapter is the beginning of the next one. It's what they call episodal, which is a series of episodes, you know, one after the other, that's tied together with a timeline. And I deliberately wrote it that way in episodes, to make it easy for the BBC and the PBS to put it together and turn it into a mini-series. Oh, wouldn't that be something? Yeah. So, the character known as Hannah is based loosely on my maternal grandmother. And the family that I talked about consists of 5 daughters, 1 son, 1 adopted son, a mother who went blind when she was 29, when the mother was 29, and a husband. They're the inner family, and they're all based on real people. Recently, Sue and I were over in England and met a lot of these people that were part of that, or the mothers and fathers were part of that, so we were kind of going, uh-oh, we hope we haven't stepped over the line here, you know, talking about these people's mothers and fathers. Anyway, so the other thing I would say is that they say when you publish your first novel, you should talk about things you really know, but really, really know. So I selected the place I was born and brought up in northwest England, a town called Birkenhead. It's one word, Birkenhead. It comes from 1,000 years ago when these Vikings came around the headland of the River Mersey and saw these sparkling birch trees, so they called it Birkenhead, and now it's just called Birkenhead. It's a small town on the south banks of the River Mersey. Ah! Okay, here's a map of Britain, you know, as I'm sure you all know. Downton Abbey is up here somewhere. Downton Abbey's down there. And when we were over there recently, we saw Downton Abbey the next episode. We're not going to tell you what it was about. Down here is Cornwall. In the centre there is the Welsh Wales. Down here is London and the south. In the middle is the Midlands. And there's a place called Liverpool there. And a little bit further up, right up there, is Scotland. And they're still with us, thank heavens. So Liverpool, can you see that Liverpool? From right there, Liverpool. Okay, I just cross over this line. Okay, this is Liverpool here, okay? And this is the River Mersey. You can't see it, it's hidden here, but there's another, Liverpool is, you all know where Liverpool is? Have you heard of Liverpool? Yeah. Everybody's heard of Liverpool. Okay, well finish this off for me. Na 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 na. All right. Okay, you get the prize. Can we sing that together? Yeah. So there's another big city in the area. This is a highly industrialized area. And the big city in this area is Manchester. Okay, and the people from Manchester and the people from Liverpool have two different cultures, but they respect each other. They're very, they really like each other. The situation is very similar to the Red Sox and the Yankees. So, anyway, Liverpool has been around forever. You know, it's been around for centuries. It's ideally situated on the coast of Irish Sea here, and all the ships coming in from the Americas as well as other places. It was a major seaport. It was the largest seaport next to London in Britain until Margaret Thatcher came along, but that's another story. So Liverpool's been around forever. They, in the 17th and the 18th and the 19th century, they were expanding so much they ran out of space. And so they looked across the river at this little town here called Birkenhead. Okay, it's a little place, and there it is. There's the River Mersey there to expand, and expand they did. And it was amazing how fast they expanded. It's amazing what they did in a 5-year period. They transformed this little town into, well, this for a start, and this just huge industrial complex. This is a 1928 picture, and you can see this is the Mersey now flying across Birkenhead. Okay, and that was just the start of it. I mean, they built everything so quickly, and the first thing they built was the docks. Okay, there was the Liverpool docks were full, so they built miles of docks going down the Birkenhead side of the Mersey. The people who worked in the docks in the United States are called not stevedores. What are they called? Are they called stevedores? Longshoremen, right, exactly. Well, in Britain they're called dockers, simply dockers. My father was a docker all his life, as was my grandfather's, as was my uncle's. You know, all the men that worked in Hannah's family and her outer family, at some stage in their lives, worked on the docks, and it was hard work. It was tough work. So after the docks came this fella. He's fallen in the water. That's not it. You know? Okay. Do you have pictures of any of them? Oh, there he is. Okay. His name is William Laird. He's a no-nonsense Scotsman, tough as nails, and he built ships. Him and his son, John, built a shipyard in Birkenhead. It was a huge place. It employed thousands of people. And it was important to the story because during World War I, Hannah, she was the first female labourer in the shipyard during World War I. Now, a labourer is someone who has no skills. All they have is might. They have muscles, and that's what they're selling. They're moving things around, carrying things. They do all the heavy work, and once again, that's really heavy work. And Hannah was the first one there. And what followed her was about 500 other women whose husbands were off fighting the war. And so she became the leader of these women. They went to her, and the people around the shipyard went to her too. So she became a social activist when she was there. And later on in her life, she became a working class legend. So we'll get to that later. So here he is. This shipyard was massive. Do you have a picture of this shipyard there, Sue? There we go, yeah. This is, this is a wooden ship, I think, They're building wooden ships still. And I'm surprised because Laird was a great advocate of metal ships. So this fella here, like that right there, that's King George V. He's visiting the shipyard, I guess. Well, he's not working there, so he must be visiting. And did you ever see that movie? It was out a couple of years ago. It was called The King's Speech. Do you remember that movie, King's Speech? Well, in the King's Speech, King George V is portrayed as being this really bad father to his two sons. He was like an ogre, He gave them a hard time, particularly the one who had the speech impediment. We would say to him, spit it out or something like that. So he came across as this really nasty person. In truth, King George V, he did bring up his sons very strictly, but his people loved him. The people loved him because he had no time for politicians. He had no time for the aristocracy. He had time for the working class. He was an advocate for the working class. And when there was any problems in the country about the working class, he would jump on a train and he'd be there. Okay, that's why they loved him. It was kind of like the Mueller guy, that everybody loved. So here he is at the shipyard. Sometimes when he goes somewhere, he says some things that he shouldn't say. There's a quote in the book, which is true, is when he was in some really poor place. He said, if I had to live like this, I'd be a revolutionary. No, you don't want your king saying stuff like that. And the last king that went head to head with the Commons, well, he lost his head in the end. He was executed. So, but he didn't care, I guess. He cared about the people. So you can kind of file the movie away in the bin that says, don't take your history from Hollywood. And particularly if Mel Gibson is involved. Is he still a train wreck, that guy? It is, yeah. Okay, poor lad. Okay, so that's a shipyard. But a couple of things about the shipyard before we move on, because it was a big deal, was that between the years of 1857 and 1995, the shipyard built over 1,400 ships. Everything from aircraft carriers to ferry boats, from nuclear submarines to Confederate raiders. The Confederate raider Alabama was made in Birkenhead shipyard, and it was a great ship. I guess it was really what side you were on. I mean, if you get up in the morning and eat grits, you'd probably thought it was a great ship. Grits. No. I shouldn't scoff at people's breakfast, though, because I'm half English, half Irish, and the English have for breakfast is bacon and eggs and sausages and baked beans. Baked beans for breakfast, isn't that great? It makes for an exciting day, I would think. So, okay, well, the next guy that followed him is this fellow. Oh, look at his eyes. He looks like a crazy guy, doesn't he? But he's one of my heroes. He owns he built a soap factory down a couple of miles down the river from the shipyard, because he made soap. This guy's name was William Lever, I'm sorry. And he had a motto, or a saying, where he said that if you ensure that your workers are happy and healthy, then you're going to be successful. It doesn't matter about anything else. And he was very successful. Okay, they were all very happy with him. Talk about the mullah. They all loved this fella because he was way ahead of his time. You know, he gave them 8-hour days. And this is at the time when the Industrial Revolution was still going on all over the world. He built a village for them to live in, a beautiful village, and he called it Port Sunlight because the name of the soap that he made was Sunlight Soap. And it's still there, the village is still there. We were there when we were over recently. These are the houses he gave to them. You know, they lived in these houses rent-free, and they're still there now, this beautiful place. It's called Port Sunlight. And we walked around and we saw, you know, all the gardens across the streets. There was an interesting art gallery at the end. There were statues everywhere. It was just a very pleasant place. And that's where he gave it to us. This is at the time in the Industrial Revolution where people are working in mills and places like this were, I mean, they were treated like slaves, you know. It was a terrible existence. He gave them, he knew everybody by name, including the children by name. Everybody wanted to work for him, you know. He gave them good salaries. He wouldn't let them come to work if they were tired. He said, we don't want tired people at work. We want people to have a good night's sleep and a hearty breakfast and come to work because they want to. And he was very successful. He's one of my heroes. And every year he would close down his soap factory, and he would get all of his workers and put them into trains and take them off on vacation for 2 weeks and then bring them back 2 weeks later. And all expenses paid. And at the end of the year, when he looked at how much money he was making, and he could make money because he could sell anything, this guy, not just soap. He was a great marketeer. And he had a lot of money left over, and he just spread it among all his workers. You know, they loved him for it. And he was, as I say, he was so far ahead of his side. Okay, Sunlight Soap. All right, this is an original package of Sunlight Soap. Okay, let me take it out. Wow. Actually, this soap was made in 1890. That soap was made in 1890 and manufactured then. So if I took this to the Antique Roadshow, I'd probably get $1,000 for it. Yeah. And I always carry it with me just in case someone comes up and says, "Do you remember how many soap with you?" "Oh yeah, no problem." Sunlight Soap. So next time you're in the market basket or in the stores, get Sunlight Soap. Don't be getting the other stuff because of this guy, you know. All right. All right. Next came another. Oh, you're already there. Great. His name was Joseph Paxton, and Joseph Paxton built right in the middle of the town this beautiful park, and it really was. There's something for everybody in this park. That's the opening to the park. So look how grandiose that is. It was a wonderful place. I spent half my childhood there because we lived close, and yeah, I have great good memories of that park. It's still there, but it's not as good as it was. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'll tell you one anecdote, is that every time a Yankee ship came into port, and I can say Yankee because I'm a Yankee now, and what would happen, the crew would get off and they'd go to the park and they'd play baseball. And everybody else that was in the park at the same time would stop what they were doing and go and watch the baseball game. But they had no idea what was going on. I mean, they didn't know the rules or anything. They just liked the exuberance of the players, you know. So that was interesting. So that's the park. And that's an important part of the story too. We can go back one too. Okay. Here's this part here, this part right here, is where during the times of the rioters assembled. That's where they would start, right across there. Sometimes thousands of them, and when they went back. So the park was a was really part of. And the other thing about the park, if you see these railings here, okay, when they were battling, at one time when the rioters were battling with the police, they broke these railings off. And if you look now, they're all gone. And I was figuring, how can you break steel off like that, you know? But I guess they did, to use as weapons, I suppose. Okay, so next.
You're talking about Olmsted.
Oh yeah, Frederick Olmsted. Yeah, he's the guy that built the park in New York, right? New York Central Park. So he came over to look at Paxton's Park, and he said it's the best park, most beautiful park he's ever seen. Really, I've got it written down. Yeah, so he was very impressed, and he took parts of it back as well to New York with him, and used it when he expanded Central Park. Yeah. So the other person that I like as well is this lad comes along from Belarus, nice Jewish lad. And do you know where Belarus is? I mean, I don't think anybody does. I don't know either. Even now, I don't know where it is. But he got a stall in the market, and Birkenhead Market was one of those places that shot up at the same time all these other things were shooting up. It started off as a small place, and suddenly it was like 100 stalls, and they sold everything, mainly to the working classes. And the class system was still embedded then in Britain. It's gone now, thankfully, but so he opened this bazaar, penny bazaar. Everything on the in his thing was a penny. Okay, it's like the dollar store or something. And he managed to, with a friend of his name was Michael Marks, and a friend of his called Tommy Spencer, they transformed their little bazaar, one penny bazaar, into this multinational, huge retail company. And every town in Britain has a Marks and Spencer's, and in Australia, and in Canada, and New Zealand. Okay, there's none over here. I wish there were, because they made really great prepared foods, and people just lived off the prepared. Nowadays, they just live off the prepared food and nothing else, because it was so good. And when they really, this is one of the best things they made. You would love this. They made the best steak and kidney pie you're ever going to have, and that's why it's not over here. Okay. Got one more? Nobody? No. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is interesting. The Boy Scout movement was inaugurated in Birkenhead in that date, 1908. And this was started by Baden-Powell. He was oh, yeah, it's in there. Actually, that's the entrance to it there. He was a war hero of the Boer War, if there was such a thing. And he taught people so well. I mean, he put together this organization that spread across the world, from Cub Scouts, to Girl Guides, to Girl Scouts, to Boy Scouts. It was right. It was a what do they call a passage? What? Rite of passage. Thank you. For young men, I mean, to go in the Boy Scouts, and he taught them some things I thought was wonderful. Okay, and I'm going to find it in 2 seconds. Okay, I'll be right with you. Talk amongst yourselves. He taught them discipline. He taught them self-sufficiency. He taught them how to survive, and he did it to make it fun. He made it fun out of the whole thing. It was a wonderful organization. Imagine how many young boys and then young adults he impressed. It must have been in the billions, worldwide. Almost every country has a Boy Scout movement. So that's the end of the people. I'm sorry, that's the end of the location. You know, for my first novel, I couldn't have wished for a better location. And everything was going on in this town. Even when I was living there, it was sprouting up all over the place. It was diverse. It was everything was new. You know, all of a sudden something else would pop up. It was a great place to grow. So now I'll just talk about the people that lived there. There were two types of people that lived in Birkenhead. The first type was the wealthy. They lived in mansions built around the park, and they prefer to live in Birkenhead than Liverpool, because Liverpool, the suburbs were just packed. There was nowhere really to live, so they lived in these mansions, and every day they commute to Liverpool on a ferry boat to their offices in Liverpool. Now, if any of you, if any of you've got it, knows my age, maybe around, you're not around my age, you know that, but do you remember the song, perhaps?
Very cross.
Ah, there you go. Oh, yeah. Okay, you and I are going to sing that one. Who sang it?
Chad and Jeremy?
No.
Is that Chad and Jeremy?
No.
I don't remember. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
Jerry and the Pacemakers sang it. Yes. Okay. So, okay. Where was I? Yeah. So that was that. The other people, the vast majority of people that lived in Birkenhead were Irish Catholics. Their forebears had come over from Ireland to get away from the years before, to get away from the famines. And when the Irish get off the boat, they don't go anywhere. And when they get straight where they are. They're like, I'm here, okay, this is fine. You know, it didn't matter whether it was, I don't know, Baltimore or Boston or New York or Halifax or Liverpool or Birkenhead. That's where they stayed. And basically their attitude was, if you think I'm going to jump in some Conestoga wagon and go shooting across the prairie where there's a whole bunch of wild Indians waiting to scalp me, think again. Yeah, you got to love the Irish, haven't you? You really do. They love to sing. I think they've got the best songs in the world, and so many of them, great songs. Yeah, they love to sing, and they also love to drink, as you all know. And they use the drink as an excuse for so many things. You know, they say, you know, you set what on fire? Oh, that was just a drink. That was just a drink. You know. But they were great people. They were God-fearing, hard-working, salt of the earth. People that never took themselves seriously, and still don't take themselves seriously. I don't take myself seriously. You may have figured that out by now. So they were the people. They were the people that lived in Birkenhead. So now I'll just talk about what comes next in terms of that 50-year period we talked about. Well, the first thing that comes along, have you have anything for that? Oh, here you go. Oh, World War I. It was a world war because, you know, everybody was involved, but if you can imagine a town like Birkenhead, which at the time was 150,000 people, and you all wake up one morning and you see that there's an entire generation of young men have disappeared, gone, you know, slaughtered in the trenches. And why, you know, why? What for? I tell you what for princes and for kings, that's who. That's why they died. Millions of them, for the egos of those people. And even though so many people died in this, it was worse to come. And what came right after it was this terrible plague. It shot across the world in 2 years. In those 2 years, it killed over 100 million people, 5% of the population of the world then. And it did it indiscriminately, young or old, male or female, rich and poor. It hit everybody. They called it the Spanish flu, but I think they don't believe that anymore, that it started in Spain. They think maybe it actually started here in the United States because it was a swine flu epidemic. And they traced it back to a pig farm 40 miles south of Kansas. And they think that's where it started because the first victim was the person that owned that pig farm. Now these folks are men on the way to Europe to take part in World War I, and most of them didn't make it. This picture is the hospital in Fort Riley, Kansas. Okay, so that was that. Good thing about it, well, it wasn't good anything about it really, but you could beat it. You had a 50% chance of not dying once you got it. So it wasn't as bad as you might think, but still in all, it was pretty bad. My grandfather's mother died of it. Okay, so that was World War I, and then what comes after that? What? Oh, yeah. At the end of World War I, Britain was bankrupt, and the soldiers coming home from the war, they came back to the same old stuff, you know, the same hierarchy, the same search for work, the same meager wages if you did find work, and there was a lot of unrest. And some of them, very few of them, looked towards communist Russia as perhaps that might be a way to improve things. And I know I did the research on it, there really wasn't that many. But people thought there was, particularly a new Prime Minister. His name is Stanley Baldwin. And he brought into his cabinet his good friend and an aristocrat whose name was Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill and Stanley Baldwin believed when they got up in the morning they could see communists in their porridge. And they figured that where communism festered was in the trade unions. So they put together a scheme to destroy the powers of the trade unions. Not that they had any powers in the first place. And it was a very clever scheme. It was complicated. And they did it, and I'm not going to go into it now because it's all in the book, because it takes some time to explain. But they did it by leveraging the dockers, not the dockers, the miners' union. Mining in those days was the worst job in the world. And these people were living below the subsistence level. So they managed to convince the trade union leaders that they needed to call a general strike. And they did. And the country came to a sudden stop. Nothing moved. Nothing, there was no transportation unless you had a bicycle. There was no light. Nothing was manufactured. Everything stopped. Boom. The country came to a standstill. And the only thing that moved was they put warships in all of the rivers in Britain. They never used them, thank God. So in the Commons, Winston Churchill was ranting about communism. Communist conspiracy is on its way. There's going to be a revolution really soon. Prepare for a different government. And it was all baloney, you know. It wasn't true. But he was getting people riled up. And even the trade union leaders, after a while, weren't sure what was going on. So they went back to the Prime Minister, who they thought was on their side, and that was the last thing, he was on our side. So they go back to this, and they say to him, well, what do we do now? Everybody's come, all these people are on strike. What do we do? How do we fix this? And he said the only way to fix it is to bring them back. Bring them all back. And that's what they did. They broke the strike and they brought all the strikers back. And they were mad as hell. Because their leadership had betrayed them. They were going to stay out until the last piece of bread was in the cupboard. But now they all had to come back. And Hannah had some really bad words for them. She called them all sorts of names. Oh, spineless jellyfish. She had a special name for Winston Churchill that I wasn't going to put in the book because I thought it might upset people. But Laura said, "Hey, it's about Hannah, so let's put it in." So we did. So she called Winston Churchill the fat Tory pig. And she blamed him for everything. Everything that was wrong, everything that happened to the working classes. She blamed him for both world wars. She'd say, that fat Tory pig started another war, you know. And yeah. So they came back, and vicious legislation was put into place for all the people all the unions that had gone on strike. So all the daytime hours were extended, they worked longer hours, and the pay was reduced. And they were mad. They were very, very unhappy, as you can expect. The strike only lasted for 10 days. But for years and years afterwards, people talked about it. And they never forgave or forgot Winston Churchill's part in it. Now, I know in this country as well as in the UK, everybody thinks of Winston Churchill as a great war leader. And without doubt, that's exactly what he was. He was an excellent war leader. He kept Britain going through the dark times, through the Blitz, through the times when, you know, the US wasn't in it yet, France was gone, Russia was on German side, through all of that stuff. Through Dunkirk, my father got off it, was wounded at Dunkirk. And he rallied the people, you know, he made them feel good about what was going on. He was a really great leader. And those speeches that he did on the radio, you know, we'll fight them in the hamlets, we'll fight them in the roadsides, and all that stuff, you know, that stuck, and people got behind him, you know. He really, what's the word I'm searching for? Has he got another? Yeah, gotta go. Yeah. Inspiration. Thank you. Oh, she's taking my wife, isn't she? Inspiration. The whole country was inspired by him. And I hate to think what would have happened if he hadn't been around. Germany probably would have invaded. There'd never be a D-Day because there'd be no jumping off place. So yeah, he was a great man. There's no doubt about it. And he was a great writer. He was a great painter. He loved America. His mother was American, and he was very great friends with FDR. And I think that helped an awful lot in getting all the ammunition we needed, all the foods that we needed in Britain to sustain the place. The main food they sent over was spam. Really, they did spam. You know, Hormel. You know, he made this thing, and everything was in it that you needed. The country lived on spam. The armies fought on spam. Not just the British army, the American army. The Russian armies fought on spam. Nikita Khrushchev once said, if it hadn't been for spam, we would have lost the war. That was our secret weapon. Really. And look what we've done to the poor little word now, you know. So, so that was the strike was what's the word? The strike was probably the worst thing that happened to the working class in Britain in those days. In fact, it was, and they never forgot or forgave Churchill as part of it. And when the time came, they voted him out of office. Okay, so what's the next one? Oh yeah, that was 1926. 3 years later, what did they get to hit them again? The Great Depression. I mean, it was terrible, wasn't it? We've just been through a recession. I don't know whether it's over yet or not, but it was nothing like the Great Depression. Yeah. And I think the United States probably got the worst of it, but it was a thing that was all over the world. And in Birkenhead, what the major problem was food. There was just no food. The first to go was the ducks in the park that I used to, when I was a kid, I used to, go and feed them on a Sunday after Mass, and now they were all gone, like in a day. They disappeared. And didn't want to let your dog out the house. And people were fighting for pigeons in the streets, just something to eat. And what they actually ate were fish heads. Fish heads, I mean, they boiled them down into soup or something. That was what they ate. So it was really bad, really bad. And the unemployment rate in Birkenhead in those times, 70%. 70% unemployed. Nobody was working. So it was really bad. And we didn't have an FDR like you folks did to glue it all back together again. So it went on, and it went on, and it went on, and it got worse. And by 1932, everybody had had enough. There was riots going on. There was marches down to London. There was a lot of suicides. Children were dying all over the place because they had no medication. And they were all malnourished, and anything that came along, particularly diphtheria, whereas the death rate was off the charts. So in Birkenhead, they marched twice. They marched from the town hall, the first place. Oh, this is an actual picture of Birkenhead, actually, on the march. Yeah, they're marching to the town hall from the park entrance that we showed you earlier. It was about 2 miles. That was the march. It wasn't a big one. Okay, but when they got in the second march, they found themselves in front of a lot of policemen with the batons out, and a fight broke out, and it expanded, and the fighting continued all afternoon, all evening. The next day, it was still fighting. The marchers had turned to rioters. The rioters had turned to looters. All the shops in the place was looted. And I often wonder, how close to death does your child have to be before you become a looter? Anyway, the fighting continues. The rioters blockaded themselves in the area called the docklands. They were the lands around the docks, close to the shipyard and the docks. That's where I was born and raised. And the police wouldn't go in because they wouldn't come out again. And the whole thing was a standstill. And then this is what happened. A newspaper man from the London Times went to Russia and interviewed Stalin. And Stalin ranted and raged about the fact that it was capitalism that had caused all these problems, all this woe across the world. He blamed capitalism, and he talked how great communism was, all that blah, blah, blah stuff. Actually, I think he was right. It was capitalism that caused it. But the guy's killing thousands of his own people at this time as well. And when the interview was over, Stalin said, it's time that the people of Britain rose up and threw their shackles off like they have at Birkenhead. He said Birkenhead. He didn't have to say Birkenhead. He could have said Newcastle or Glasgow or East London. Lots of places were happening. These are big cities that are having riots. And he chose to say Birkenhead. And from then on, Birkenhead was, for all intents and purposes, the epicenter of a communist conspiracy that didn't exist. This part bothers me saying it, honestly, I got to tell you. Because what happened then was that hundreds of policemen descended on Birkenhead. They came from all over. They came from Liverpool, they came from Chester, they came from Birmingham, they came from the Midlands, they came from Wales. Hundreds of them came to Birkenhead. And on the 13th of September, 1932, at midnight, these policemen attacked the docklands. They pulled people from the beds. They beat them with the batons. They cracked skulls, they cracked the ribs, they cracked arms and legs. They left them in the gutters. Everyone, every house was hit in the docklands. And they smashed every window. And they brutalized throughout the night. And they had lists, special lists of suspected communists, lists of suspected leaders. And they were the ones that took the brunt of it. So it was a disgrace, absolute disgrace. And it could have been stopped because the town councillors knew it was going to happen and did nothing about it. there was hundreds of people arrested. And there was, the hospitals were full. It's a better note than I'm giving right now. Hospitals were full, the jails were full. 2 days after, King George V visited, and he went all around the Docklands. He was horrified by what he saw. 20,000 people marched on the town hall of Birkenhead to find out who was responsible. And of course, nobody claimed to be responsible. There was no answer to that. All of the people that were arrested were dragged before the magistrates in the courts, and all the charges were thrown out because there was no evidence against them. I mean, they were just normal people. They weren't doing anything. They were just in bed, and so everybody was, as I say, was sent home except for the ones that were called the suspected communists. And they did between 1 to 4 years of hard work. Hard labour it was called, 1 to 4 years. Now, these men hadn't had a square meal in the last 3 years. So giving them 1 to 4 years of hard work was a death sentence, because that's what most of them died of, heart attacks. And I get so mad when I think about it. So that was not the worst that could happen. The next thing that happened was World War II. I mean, talk about one thing after another. World War II came along. Once again, the boys went off to fight the battles. But this time there was a lot of civilians involved. There was a lot of bombs dropped during the Blitz. And of course we were bombing them as well, but hey, they started it in the first place. So imagine this. Imagine you're a woman who's working in a munitions factory, and she spends all day doing this hard work. She comes home. She maybe has a cup of tea and a piece of cheese because all the food was rationed. And then the sirens would go. And she'd go out to the, what do you call them? Bomb shelters, yeah. Go out to the shelters. And they were terrible places. I mean, they stunk. They were, there wasn't many of them either. They didn't fill the requirements. There was only 10% of the population could have got into these places. And she sat there all night, worrying first about her children, because her children had been taken away, along with 3,000 other children, before the Blitz started. They were taken up to the Welsh Hills, where there was safety. And they stayed for the whole time. So she hadn't seen her children in years. She's worried about them. She's worried about her husband was in the army. Was he alive still? And was the house, had that been bombed? Were her neighbours killed? All these things she must have been worried about. Okay. And she did that almost every night for over a year. So that was in stuff that was in my mind. That must have been awful. Do you have the picture of the Blitz? Or? No? Oh yeah, there you go. This road goes down to the shipyard, actually. Starts up here, goes down to the shipyard. Birkenhead and Liverpool were clobbered because they were prime targets. Shipyards, docks, so they were hit pretty hard almost every night. Okay. So, to end this part, we have a little humour here. Dogs rate shelter. The British love the dogs just like Americans love the dogs, don't they? So, okay, that's enough of the sad stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the real Hannah. Okay, she was a piece of work, no doubt about it. And she was always involved, She was like, people would come to her in the town and ask almost permission from her to do something, She was like the Godfather, She was like, and they come to her, and everybody was kind of afraid of her, because she was dangerous. She wasn't as vicious, she wasn't as violent as I put her in the book, but she did clobber people, particularly if they asked for it. so, so she was cantankerous at times, and then times she was lovable. I loved her. I lived close to her. I used to run errands for her. And she had favourites, so I was her favourite godson. Grandson, yeah. Probably godson as well. And so if you were one of the men that married one of her daughters and you stepped out of line, well, God help you. Because she'd be around in no time. And the other thing she would do, she'd go into pubs. In those days, women didn't go into pubs, very few. And she would go into a pub and she'd tell the men, get out, get out. What are you doing here, drinking beer? You're wasting money, get out, your family's waiting for you to tell them now, get out of here. Go away, you know. How embarrassing is that in front of all your mates, you know. But that's what she would do. And she would go to the town hall. If she got a bee in her bonnet, she'd go striding down to the town hall, and all the people in the town hall, all the workers in the town hall would go under the desks, you know, and they say, is she gone yet? You know, so that's what she was. She was a tyrant to a degree, but a lovable one. And all her life she scrimped and scraped, and in the end she had a little nest egg. And if you wanted some money from her, no questions asked, she'd just give it to you. So she was very generous. But as I say, she was dangerous. She clobbered me once. Yeah, my aunt, my mother and I were visiting an aunt, and Hannah showed up, uninvited, and she was looking for an argument, and she got one. And it was getting worse and worse. And as it was escalating, I was maybe sitting in a chair a couple of feet away by a table, and I knew it was her fault, you know. It was really her fault, the whole thing. So I said something stupid. I said, why don't you just go home? Oh, it was the wrong thing to say. She went, 1, 2, boom. She didn't punch me. She slapped me across the face and knocked me clean out of that chair. And sometimes when I'm laying in bed at night, I can feel a hand on the side of my chest. A few years before that, I'm almost finished. A few years before that, I took an examination called the 11 Plus. Every child in Britain, when they reached the age of 11, had to take this examination. It took a day. It was relative normal subjects. And if you passed that examination, then you were going to go to a school over here that was better than the school you would have gone to if you failed. Okay, it was streaming children at the age of 11, and it was very unfair. It meant that if you failed the exam, you were going to be a milkman, or work in the mines, or in the factories, or be an electrician if you were lucky. That was the best you could do. If you're a woman, you'd be in the store, and the best you could do would be a secretary. That's what it was. But if you passed that 11 plus, then you were going to have a career. You were expected to have a career, and you were expected to make something of yourself. It was very unfair. I was lucky, and I passed the exam. And Hannah sent for me. She beckoned me, and I went round to her house, and she took a record up, and she put it on a gramophone, and we started to dance. And we danced and we danced and we danced all over our living room to this record. I mean, I was 11 years old, she's an old lady, and we're dancing away. And the reason she was so happy was because I passed the 11 plus, which meant that I would not spend my life working on the docks like a husband had done, like a son had done, like a brothers had done. I was going to escape from the docklands, and I did. Well, I'd just like to finish off with this, that I wasn't the only one. There was another fellow that escaped from the docklands too. He was my cousin, his name is John Hogan. Nice guy, really nice guy. And smart, super smart, much smarter than me. And he was the CEO of an oil company in Oklahoma for a while. And then he moved on to somewhere else. That's what those folk do. They go from one place to the other, you know, this board to this board and this board and so on. And they're gathering wealth all the time that they're doing it. And he's very wealthy. He's very wealthy. In fact, he has a He has a chalet in the French Alps. He has, how do you call it, a house in London, a small house in London. And then he has a huge spread outside of Cambridge. But you know what he doesn't have? You know what he doesn't have? He doesn't have a published novel. Thank you. What's that? He doesn't have Sue, yeah. Okay, thanks. Anybody got any questions? You want to sing Beatles songs with me?
I'm not the only one in this room that can remember the Beatles.